Welcome to a special edition of The Wireless Way. And I say special because you're about to find out. I think I've only done this one other time, but I got two guests today. So it's a twofer. Yeah, it's a two for one kind of deal. I was talking about being efficient and effective. So here we are. So Paul Niddle's with us, as well as Joe McGuire. And a little bit about Paul first. He's the founder and president of MTMG. It's a technology leader with over 30 years of experience in IT and telecommunications. He's led an international expansion for a managed mobility service provider. Hey, is on the wireless way, makes sense. In 18 countries. So he's got a lot of experience beyond the US borders. He's built high performing B2B teams at T-Mobile, achieving record breaking results. And at the helm of MTMG, Paul oversees a team of experts guiding businesses through digital transformation and solving complex IT challenges. As host of the MTMG IT Roundtable podcast, he engages top executives. By the way, I was one of them, pretty proud of that. In discussions on emerging technologies, his leadership focuses on driving growth, efficiency, and long term success for clients. We're going to talk about the podcast at the end. So hang on for that. And got to give Joe some love here. Joe, he's the chief solutions officer at MTMG, brings over 30 years of experience in sales and marketing and business development across IT, mobility, and energy sectors. He leads a global team optimizing IT and telecom investments, specializing in MSPs, mobile management systems, and IoT solutions. Man, what a great, we got some talent here, folks. I love it. These are all buzzwords that I love to talk about. Previously, Joe served as CRO at AutoCavo, driving AI powered fleet management sales and led T Mobile's B2B division, managing a partner portfolio and launching its first co selling program. So, again, a lot of great experience there. And here's the coolest thing I've ever seen. He's the mayor of Northville, New Jersey. Man, that could be a whole nother
Mayor
episode,
Joe.
probably.
Exactly.
Here, Joe. He applies his leadership and his skills to public service, known for collaboration and innovation. Joe consistently delivers growth and cost savings for his clients and his residents. I just added that on there. Hey, welcome, guys. How's it going?
Going great.
Very well.
That is a mouthful, man. I am
Woo!
very impressed that you got through all that.
I, I am too. No, you're right. I get excited. My whole life, I've been a
Mhm.
fast talker. I get excited. I love. There's certain topics just push my buttons, and everything we've been talking about since I first met you guys. Yeah, this is stuff that I just love talking about. So I'm really grateful that I was on your show. Now here we are on my show, and got a great show lined up. As always is the case. What's not the bio? And I got to start with you, Paul. What's not the bio? How did you get here?
So it's funny. I was thinking a lot about that because you can't give us the heads up that these were some of the questions that might be coming. But one of the things that I really thought about is the founding philosophy that I've had for 30 years, which is I end all my emails with just let me know how I can help. And sometimes people can see it as it's just a tagline. It's a whatever. It's don't necessarily mean it, but it is something that I've always genuinely really meant. And I was talking with Joe about this a few years ago, and I said, really want to turn this into a business where we literally do what I just have been signing emails with. So we had been playing with this idea for a while. And when it came up this year, we finally had the time and we were both available to be able to do it. We decided we were going to jump in with both feet and create MTMG to do that. Our whole goal is to just sit down with clients on their side of the table and help them fix things in their IT realm, whether it's technology problems, whether it's sourcing problems, whether it's saving money, optimizing, you name it. But the whole way we wanted to build the company is just about making it very clear we're here for the customer, the client. We're not here to sell anything. I know that sounds crazy, but we are not. We are here to guide. We don't want to charge clients. We get funded by all the vendors that we can work with, but we'll get to that later. Just it really came down to we wanted to help. We wanted to build an organization because we see clients struggling with companies that don't meet all their needs or struggling with unable to keep all the lights on and solve all these challenges. There's just so many things they're struggling with. We wanted to try to help. But Joe, I don't know if I missed anything there.
No, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly why we're here. It's exactly what attracted me to work with Paul on this and has been attracting other people to come and work with us as well, is that guiding principle, that philosophy that Paul just outlined.
Mhm. And it's funny. That's one of the things that you made the perfect analogy a couple of months ago when we were talking, the tool belt.
Yeah.
And uh, Chris, I think you'll get a kick out of this, but Joe, why don't you talk about that one?
Yeah. Paul and I have both worked for companies where you've got a certain portfolio that you can sell. And it's like having a tool belt. You've got one tool. So if you're selling hammers, everything's a nail and you're just going to sell those hammers. And we were coming across people who needed more than that. And we were frustrated because we couldn't provide those things. So here we've got, as Paul mentioned, a lot of vendors that we work with. Our tool belt has just expanded greatly. And so now, oh, you need this? We've got that. Oh, you need something else? We've got that. The tool belt just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we can meet the needs of people most of the time with what they want. And if we can't, we'll get them to a place where they can and hopefully be able to work with them in the future.
So let me get back to what's on the bio, Paul. And I'm gonna come to you, Joe. So you're up next. But what did you do? Have you always been in technology? Did you come out of high school early? Were you a techie person?
No, I was not. I got out of college. I started working for a bank and I was DJing on the weekends, doing weddings and
Oh,
special events and things. And I decided I couldn't stand working in a bank anymore. And the entertainment company that I was working for was expanding to do thousands of events every year. So they asked me, did I want to come on board and help them with their operations? And I said, who knows? Maybe I can make a career at this. So I jumped in and was running an organization that did 3,000 events. We had DJs, videographers, photographers, florists, you name it. And part of my job was scheduling everything and making sure everything was handled and everybody was on board and everybody was in the right place. So I did that for almost 10 years and decided I had to grow up at some point and get a real job, and then did. And a gentleman, Jim Conti, who was actually one of my DJs at the time, but he had just gotten a gig as the regional director for this tiny little mobile carrier called Omnipoint. So many people probably haven't even heard of it. It was the single GSM provider in the US. What that meant is it was a technology that would work in the US, but it would also work around the world. The US from AT&T and T and Singular, and then what became Verizon, they all used CDMA. And so their systems wouldn't work with the providers in the UK or in Germany or in France. OmniPoint was built to take advantage of that international carrier
hmm.
experience. So he said, hey, look, I think you can come and do this. And I said, Jim, I've never been in sales. I have no idea what I'm doing. He said, don't worry about it. I can teach you all that stuff. You know how to manage people. You're good. I think you could do this really well. And I'll never forgive him because 25 years later, I'm still in the business. But it was a really interesting change, a really interesting career jump, but I'm thrilled I did it.
That's fantastic. Quick question. In your opinion, who is the all-time best DJ? Famous DJ?
I
Yeah.
have to be honest. I haven't really paid attention to if you're talking about the ones that make music. So I know Mark Ronson. That's about the only name I really know. I like some of
Okay.
his stuff.
Okay. That's
But as
fair.
far as like a wedding DJ, there was DJ Rafi
No,
in
I'm
Medford.
like a radio
Oh,
personality.
radio DJ. That's
Come
a
on.
good question.
When I give you my answer, you can be like, "Oh, of course." Ready?
Well, I used to listen to Don Imus a lot for years, but then he
Huh?
went off the rails. But
Yeah, yeah. How
so
about
what's
Casey
your answer?
Kasem? Casey
Casey.
Kasem.
Oh,
Come
you're
on,
right.
man.
You're
Yeah,
right.
American
You are
Top
absolutely
40.
right.
How do you beat that guy?
You can't.
Yeah. There's
You
definitely some
cannot.
other shock DJs that I listened to when I was in my earlier years. But yeah, I think Casey Kasem was like America's DJ for
He really
decades.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, man. So that's cool. That's good. So I'm glad to hear that. I've noticed this trend of the young folks coming into technology. They're coming out of college into technology, whereas folks like us, we call ourselves the more tenured professionals. Yeah, we've all had a life prior to technology. So, Joe, how
Mhm.
about you? Joe, what's your story behind the story here? Where'd you start
Yeah,
out?
I'll start. Actually, let me start with what's in the bio, but buried in the bio, and you mentioned it, right? So I happen to be mayor of Northvale, New Jersey, which is about 20 miles from New York City. Small town, about 5,000 people that live in it. If you're ever in Northvale, please stop in. Let me know. We'll give you a tour. But in fact,
Spend some money, have
yeah,
lunch. Yeah.
spend some, absolutely. But I just did a wedding about 3 hours ago or so for some folks at the Borough Hall. So probably one of the best parts of the job is to be able to do that. But yeah, so when I got out of college, I was really just looking for something in marketing or sales, maybe not so much sales, but more marketing. And I got a job at a high level security company, which was run by people from the Israeli military. And they specialized in making what's called taut wire intrusion detection systems, which are these fences that line the border of Israel. And they have these sensors on them with taut wire. So any movement, anything that triggers an alarm. And we actually did a lot of work for correctional facilities here. And so we could do a whole other podcast on experiences in the correctional facilities, but quite often I have to go to these facilities for various reasons. And that's a trip. And it's just a lot. So
That is, I can imagine.
going from there, I wound up at a firm totally unrelated to what we do today. It was card technology, anything on a plastic card, embossing, mag stripes, smart chips, anything. There was a company that I worked for that did all of that and put the stuff on the card. There was a guy there who had left, and I had worked for him, and he went to a company called RAM Mobile Data. And about 6 months after he left, he called me and said, "Hey, this is really growing. It's this wireless thing, wireless data." And I didn't really know what he was talking about. And so he gave me an education on it, and he convinced me to go work there. So I went and I worked there. RAM Mobile Data became Bell South Wireless Data, which became Singular, which became AT&T. And that's where I got my start really there. And I worked there for about 3 years. And I wound up then moving to a company called Go America Communications, which was the first company to put a wireless browser across 3 different platforms, which was like the Palm Pilot, the BlackBerry, and I think Windows Pocket PC at the time. And then from there, I wound up at T-Mobile, and that's where I met Paul and spent 18 years there. But yeah, it was just interesting how we used to separate out wireless data and cellular data until they became one
That's
in the
right.
early 2000s.
So, Joe, yeah, something you said, I have an opinion question for you as well. So, which device really set the course for smart devices? Was it the Palm Pilot or the BlackBerry? Which one really kind of became mainstream, the first kind of the OG smart device?
That's a good question. I have to say, probably the BlackBerry. The Palm
I
Pilot, of
agree.
course, was out there first and made some big impressions, but I think BlackBerry really brought that conversion with wireless and then businesses and consumers using it over time. And that was, I think, a revolutionary device.
It
Um,
was, I agree.
yeah. And it was the first device where people found a real need other than, hey, I want to look at a stock ticker or sports scores. People were using their email and it was functional for work. And it really set in motion this need for more apps. And eventually the iPhone came out around 2007 and created all that. But really it was that foundation of, hey, I can use this for work on a regular basis.
I would agree, Joe. I think that I remember when it was first coming out, and I was a sales manager at the time, and I was going through a training to learn all about it. And the habit at the time had been wherever you were, I was working, I was in training all day, but my team would be emailing me approvals all day. So the typical response was, okay, when I'm done with training, then I have to go find somewhere to log in, get onto my laptop and respond to those emails. And I remember sitting in the training class being handed my new BlackBerry for the first time and realizing, wait, I don't have to pull out my laptop to do this. I can just do this right on the phone and say, "Approved," get everything done. This is so much more efficient. And the light dawned and it was just such a powerful experience. So I think you hit the nail on the head, Joe.
Do you guys remember when people used to travel with their laptops and they would go to a hotel and then they would plug it into a phone and say, I've got to
Mhm.
sync up my email. And sometimes you'd hear people say, just going to let it sit there for an hour or so. Let me sync up my email. Whatever. And when BlackBerry came out, it was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever because then you could stop doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was
Completely.
at a Fortune 50 company at the time, and this would have been what, early 2000s? Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yep.
2002, something like that. But it was
2003.
like only like VPs can have them. The people that
Yeah.
sit at their desk and do nothing, it felt when you're a frontline person, you think the VPs are just sitting at their desk waiting on reports. But I thought that was really funny how it's evolved too, from just executives carry the devices. Now it's all the way down to entry level. It's a part of the uniform, almost a part of the standard ish devices. That's pretty cool. MG. Tell me, how do we come up with that name? And what would you say is like your mission statement or your main? You hit on a little bit, but expound on that.
Sure. Sure. So it originally started back in COVID era. Joe and I were talking about creating something, and it was going to be all about mobile. And the whole concept originally was just we want to be able to take mobile to MSPs and to other organizations that don't touch mobile today and make it something that we could make it easy for them to support mobile. And the kind of the play around it was we're here to mine the mobile gap for you. There's a gap in your support for your existing customers, and we're here to help you mine that gap. And so it became Mine the Mobile Gap. But went fast forward a couple of years to this year when we actually got around to finally starting the business, it quickly expanded way beyond mobile. Joe was alluding to this before that as we started to build the organization and started talking to some people that were either former colleagues, former customers, and saying, what do you think of this idea? Would you be interested in working with a company that might be able to do X, Y, and Z? We were floored with how many people raised their hand and said, I don't do mobile, but I know networks. And I love your concept and I'd love to help if a customer has problems with networks. Or, you know what? I actually just was doing all sorts of stuff with Dell and EMC and all of this infrastructure optimization. And it's not mobile, but I'd be happy to help companies that could do these sort of things. And so all these people kept saying, I love the concept of being an expert guide for a client that you sit on their side of the table, you help them get the most out of their technology investments across now all sorts of different disciplines. So now we're out to 9 disciplines. And so Mind the Mobile Gap didn't really make sense anymore. So we condensed it to just MTMG, and this is where we're at. So I don't think I missed anything. Did I do?
No, it's pretty simple. I think, Chris, you would say mission statement, and I think we hit on it before. The mission statement is very simple. We just want to help organizations with IT mobility issues. And we just want to listen to them and get them in the right direction and bring in the resources that they need because they can't do all the research on their own.
That's true. I love comedy, and every now and then I got this little side of my brain that always wants to make a joke of something. So contradicting to that statement, I think MTMG could be make the money grow. Make the money grow now.
I
It's
like
not just for
that.
you, but for your
Yeah.
customers, right? Because
Mhm.
the whole point of solving business problems with technology, if you're helping your client be more efficient, effective, isn't that making their money grow? Leads me to another kind of pivot to another question around that thought process. Advice. You're talking to a lot of companies now, and it's gone beyond mobility. What advice do you have for businesses that are struggling with technology?
I would say really 2 things. I think number 1, the advice is be humble. Don't think that you know everything, and don't be afraid to say, hey, I need some help. That's really the first thing. I think in a lot of IT departments, you've got people who have a lot of pride. They want to, say, hey, I know all of this kind of stuff. But what we find is that if you stepped away from technology for 6 months and then came back to it, you'd be amazed at how many things have changed and how it's evolved. So it's constantly evolving. And it's almost impossible to expect people to do their daily tasks, manage teams, meet business goals, and then also keep up with everything that's going on in the industry. And so that's the very first thing would be take a step back, ask for help, try to find out, always be learning about what's going on. The second thing would be there's so many resources out there. We live in the information age. Take advantage of those resources. And when you do ask for help, you've got so many places that you can go and receive advice and help and so on. And so I think that if you are struggling with tech, just know that there's a lot out there that you can tap into and just be open to it.
I think you hit the nail on the head again, Joe. But it's funny because there's this adage that I keep thinking about. It's almost all the problems that IT guys face and IT women face, it can be overcome if they have the right combination of experience of themselves, the right vendor relationships, and the time to do the work. The challenges in today's environment, they usually only have 1 or maybe 2 of those things, but not all 3. And that's where working with a company like us is we're here to help them do that. We've got the experience, we've got the vendor relationships, and that's why we're here, is to put in that time so that they can stay focused on their core job while we help them get the best out of their mobile managed service provider or their MSP, or finding the right new UCaaS solution, or finding the right SaaS remediation platform, or things along those lines. Because of the way Joe and I built this, we're completely agnostic, but we get paid by the vendors so that clients don't pay us. They can have us as an extension of their team without actually having to pay us for that time. 9 times out of 10, we're just getting the whatever decision they make, we get paid by that end customer or that end vendor. And we stay involved because our whole business model is based around long-term relationships and making sure people stay happy. So it is a win in that they get the expert guidance and the right relationships, and they don't have to pay for
So that's another example of a good win. Let me ask you a question. I feel like we're at this interesting time
it.
in our industry, the changing of the guard, I'll call it, for lack of a better word. I just turned 55. If you're listening and you think I'm attacking old people, I am an old guy. Well, actually, I don't feel like an old guy. I may look like an old guy, but my point being, especially around, I've been doing a lot of consulting and work on IoT and some other advanced wireless technologies. And I've seen this trend. If the decision makers at the C level are not in technology, they're not a technology person, they're a widget person, or they're a farmer, or they're a transportation, or there's something outside technology. There's like this reluctance to try new things because there's, hey,
Mhm.
why would I need a sensor? I pay Bob. He's got a clipboard. He just walks around and he checks it all off. And why would I want to change that? I have to fire Bob. I'm like, no, you wouldn't. Do you ever see that? I think that's part one of the question about how do you help coach and educate? Because
Mhm.
it kind of leads me into my next thought. A lot of companies just don't know there's a better way because
Mhm.
they've always done it this way. We've all heard that. If you worked in any group of folks, that's like the enemy of an organization. Oh, we've always done it that way.
Mhm.
This reluctance to either trust new technology or try something new. I think that's a role you guys really play in, is educating the client that, hey, here's your problem. You might have thought was this is just how it has to be. We just got to deal with this, but there is another way. Do you see any of that in your consulting or your engagements with clients?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those things that I've seen for years. One of my former clients at my previous company, they had huge organizations. They were a Fortune 20 company, and they had sprawling IT organizations all over the world at massive centers. But one of the things they did really was they had the global shared services IT organization, but then they also had business unit IT. And their whole goal was to understand the business unit and understand their business needs, and then translate that into IT speak for the global shared services teams to understand how they could help better benefit the business. And they did that really well. And it's funny, one of our advisors, one of our fractional CIOs, his name is Mark Franciosa. He used to be the CIO of Praxair and Lyondell-Basel, and he constantly is preaching to us about, you have to align business goals with your IT. It doesn't matter how fancy the tech is, or just because it says AI or just because it says cloud doesn't mean it's what you need to be purchasing. Is it solving your business need? Then sure, great. But if it's not, don't just buy the hype. And that is something that a lot of people need to hear, and lean on people like Mark or lean on other people to be able to say, is that really the best way for me to solve this challenge?
Yep.
And
Fantastic.
the one thing I'll add to that is when we do see people go down the road of what you mentioned, Chris, which is, hey, I don't want to take Bob's job because he's our guy that does this stuff on paper. I always say to them, look, my favorite quote from Steve Jobs is, if you don't cannibalize yourself, somebody else will. And there's always competition out there. So if you're not going to be open to this and try to change, someone else is going to do that. And before you know it, your competition is going to be, eating your lunch. You can stay that way. There's always competition who are looking to do it better, more efficiently.
Gosh. No, you nailed it. You have to, you can't be your own worst enemy. And I've seen that a lot. And sometimes it's just about educating. Hopefully they're receptive to being educated. And that's even worse when they don't even want to learn. And then at that point, I'm like, hey, good luck. I'm moving on. I'm not going to force myself on you, but there's a lot of folks out there that need to learn about solving business problems with technology. Speaking of learning and observations, I want to pivot again. So you've had your podcast now for some time. And I've had mine for some time, and I just love how it's helping me grow as a person, as a professional. What's been your observations and any lessons learned through your podcasting experience?
I think it's opened a lot of doors or it's speeded along a lot of relationships that we may not have been able to have in the past. We've had CEOs and we've had CIOs and CISOs on the podcast to talk about their perspectives and their experiences, and it has created so much goodwill and so much fascinating conversation. Every conversation I come off of, I've learned something, at least something, if not multiple things. And we can get into specific trends that we've seen, but on a high level, that ability for people's goodness and these leaders that are willing to share their time and their thoughts, that goodness is so great to be able to share and spread. It's just been really very heartening to go through it as an organization and to be part of that. But Joe, I don't know if you have anything else or what else
Yeah,
you might want to add.
I would certainly agree with you. I have found that it restored my faith in humanity a bit because in the tech world that we are in, what grabs the headlines, especially today, is AI, and AI is going to dehumanize us and so on and so forth. But what we find, I think, with most of the people that come on the podcast is that business today, whether it's tech or not, is still human to human. People are making connections with partners, with customers. People do business with people. They don't do business with servers and AI. And you can have all the technology and you can implement AI into your whatever systems you have. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the humans that are going to be making the decisions, putting the good data in there that's going to enable you to make those good decisions. And it's really just about all the people who are there who are successful. It's really because of the relationships they developed, how they treated their teams, it's all human related. So it has really helped me out in that respect.
No, I have to agree with both of you. That is, I like what you said, restores your hope and humanity. Yeah, it's great to have these conversations, and often that's why I love to know the backstories because I know your professional bio, I know what your LinkedIn profile says, but it's inspiring, encouraging. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's started somewhere, and maybe it was somewhere different than where you are today, and that's okay. It's about the journey. We're all in this journey
Mhm.
together, and I do find, yeah, that even different companies, different technologies, competitors, we're probably have more in common than we want to, admit in a lot of cases, but we're all just you're trying to help make a living for our families and help solve
Mhm.
problems and all that stuff is pretty cool. You mentioned AI, which kind of brings me to my next thought about the future. You hit on a little bit, but more around what are your thoughts on the future of wireless and mobility and what's the next tech solution that's going to capture the headlines or is there one? What are your thoughts on that? Where are we going? I don't know who wants to take that first. Joe?
Yeah. So I don't know like the next tech innovation, but for wireless and mobility, what I will say is that it's not going anywhere. And it's just going to get bigger and better and faster. And as the networks evolve and people are already starting to talk about and so on, we're going to come to a day. I don't know when it's going to be, but we're going to come to a day when they're constructing a building and there's going to be no wires installed in that building for communications. And
Right.
people are going to say, I can't believe they used to use wires for this stuff. Almost, I can't believe people used to drive cars. And so, like I said, I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's just going to continue and it's going to be in every aspect of our lives that it's not in yet. And I think we don't know what the innovations are going to be because we don't know what those capabilities are just yet. And I think we're still figuring it out with 5G.
Mm.
Certainly on both the business and consumer levels, there hasn't been that like one or two or three killer apps that you could point to as a result of 5G. It just, so I don't have specifics on that. I just know that it's just going to continue to evolve.
Completely
What about you,
agreed.
Paul?
And
Yeah.
I completely agree. And it's funny. I've been here. I shouldn't say we've all been hearing about the promise of 5G for years and how this was going to be a game changer. It was going to revolutionize everything. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't seen it really revolutionize anything just yet. It's made things much better in a lot of different ways, but there still evolving it. The 6G may do more things, but it has gotten better and better, but it isn't the revolutionary change that I think people were expecting. But one of the things that I do see over the next couple of years is there's now so many different ways you can transmit data. It's not just about 5G or cellular. There's now satellite, and not just the one that gets the headlines today of Starlink, which that's a very good product too, but there's a lot of options. There's low Earth orbit, there's middle Earth orbit, and there's high Earth orbit that all have different capabilities, different costs, but they're all there. And not a lot of companies know all about that. But even beyond that, Joe's been really educating me on this thing, LongFi. And it's in a Wi-Fi that's super, and it's something that a lot of companies are starting to look at how they can take better advantage of that. Again, getting rid of cables, making the same connectivity in new and different ways. That's something that I find really fascinating, and how it's not just about, okay, we're going to use a cellular network to do this. It's, there's so many different ways you can transmit that data. What's the right application for what you're trying to do? So I think that's going to be a lot of what we're talking about over the next couple of years. And the other thing is data privacy and security. I think that is going to be, everybody talks about cybersecurity today, but it is getting more and more dangerous out there. And it's not a question of when anymore, or it's not a question of if anymore. It's a question of when. Every company is getting hit. Joe and I hadn't had more than 3 weeks in business together, and our team was already getting spam saying, "Hi, it's Joe McGuire, and I need you to go get some gift cards and do this other thing." And the whole team was like, "Wait, did we get hacked or something?" And it had nothing to do with being hacked, but it was a phishing attempt. But
Yep.
we were just a tiny little small business that had only been in business a couple of weeks, and we were already starting to get hit. It was really amazing. So
Yeah,
I think that's going to
nice.
be something we're all going to have to deal with too.
Did you get those gift cards, by the way?
No, I didn't. No, I
I was
didn't.
still waiting.
Oh man, God, there were so many thoughts I had going on while you both were talking. Going back to the advice piece, I mean, and trends and what you've learned, is there any observations, probably the most common blind spot for a business you're talking to that surprises you? You know, in all your consultations and talking, is there like a blind spot where the clients, I got nothing, I don't know what to do with this, and you know, is it surprising? And what I mean by that, I mean, because even for me in my world, I talk to clients. Just to give you an example, what I'm thinking when I'm talking to clients that have hundreds of devices, and I say, "Hey, so how are you? What's your MDM strategy?" And they're like, we don't have an MDM. We're just doing text and emails and people checking LinkedIn. We don't really need it for that. I'm like, is there any corporate data on these devices? And you can see, or they're like, yeah, we have an MDM, but who manages it again? Oh, that was Bob. Yeah, he's been gone for 6 months. No one's even logged into the portal. So that surprises me. So I'm like, how is it with all the talk around cybersecurity? This is a blind spot for you guys. So do you see anything like that that you could share with us?
I think you took my answer, because a big blind spot is mobile threat defense.
Yeah.
If you think about how networks are accessed today, most of the access is coming from mobile devices. And it's an increasing amount of security breaches that are attempted on mobile devices. So I think companies, for some reason, people at companies, they still think that they're somehow protected from that, and they're not. It's no different than me accessing my via a wired computer. I think that's a huge blind spot. And the other one is that Paul mentioned it before. It's the blind spot of not aligning your IT goals with your business goals. And we see that. We see companies that are pursuing certain things that don't necessarily line up with what the business is trying to accomplish. And that constantly. And I would call it a blind spot, because that gap has to be bridged.
Mhm. I would agree.
Yeah.
Just going back to both of your points about mobile, though, I hear it all the time. We have BYOD. I don't really care about security on mobile devices.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good one.
you need to, because if you've got corporate data on there, it is something that is going to be attacked. And a lot of times I hear it from IT leaders that say, I've got an MDM, I've got Avanti, I've got whatever that should protect us. And no, it doesn't. You really need to be thinking of a holistic strategy along those lines, but how you can have a tool that'll work with your MDM to be a much more robust tool than just an MDM that can not really protect you from any of those phishing or spear attempts. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen is I have BYOD. I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Is there an argument to be made? And this is for both of you. I'd love to get your opinion. BYOD versus corporate liable devices. I've talked to some companies and they're like, yeah, we're BYOD. We have 3,000 users. But because of the concerns around corporate data, corporate espionage, and all that, all the reasons you mentioned, we're really considering going back to issuing out corporate devices so we can control it and we have positive control over it. We can tell them exactly how to use it, et cetera. Does that seem like it could be a trend? Or are there enough options out there for BYOD environments where you can secure your data? What do you say there in terms of going back to corporate liable or finding a way to make BYOD secure?
From my perspective, what I keep seeing is there's a significant push back away from BYOD because of all the cybersecurity issues. But also there's it creates a dynamic between company and employee that, all right, I'm either going to reimburse you for everything that you do with your phone for work, whether that's international travel, it's calls that you have to make, it's a vast amount of data that you use that you may not have would have had to otherwise. And they have to figure out the right amount of money to compensate the employee for. It becomes a real challenge on where is that dollar amount that works properly, that is fair to the end employee and it's fair to the company without wasting money for either party. And that's where corporate libel allows you to be much more stringent and be very clear on how you control those costs. Because just saying it's BYOD doesn't mean you're not going to run up extra costs. Because how many times do people expense their mobile bill? Yes, they get their stipend of $35 or $40 a month, but they actually expense the long distance calls they had to make. Long distance or international calls can be a lot less expensive when they're made on a corporate libel line than they are on a personal libel line.
I think, Chris, I don't know if you have found this, but I think there's also a generational aspect
Mhm.
to this. I think older people, you mentioned 55 before. Okay, so we'll use that as older. I'm with you there on that. We would probably tend to say corporate liable would be the way to go and have company provided devices. But I think younger generations are probably saying, no, I don't, why am I going to, I have this device. I've always used this device. It's mine and I'm going to use it for work as well. So I think younger companies, as those people get into leadership more, I think you're going to see just that more of that trend for BYOD. And I don't know if you see that as well.
Yeah. And that makes sense until they get bit by it, right? I
Yeah.
think that's usually
That was
there's
good.
always this catalyst for major change. It's usually pain. But another thing that I've talked to companies, especially if you have a direct sales force, well, let's face it, most people, and I think everyone's in sales at a company, if I get my words out here, everyone's in sales at a company. But yeah, specifically people with the title sales and their job description, let them use their own phone number and then leave the company to go to a competitor, and now you have all your clients still calling them. Why is that not a problem? Now, that'd be a big problem for me if I was a CR or senior sales leader. I'm like, no, I'm giving you a number, and this is the number people are going to call you at. So when you leave, we'll just give that number to your replacement. That just makes sense to me, but that doesn't seem to be a pain point to a lot of folks. That's interesting.
I think again, maybe because we're all old here, but I have that same mindset. But what I do see a lot in younger salespeople is that they hop from company to company and they want to bring their
That's right.
existing clients with them. So the exact problem you're talking about is also a benefit to the new company. So if you're hiring that new hotshot salesperson that comes with a track record of, hey, they sold to X, Y, and Z company, you want them to have that same number so their person that may have called them before can still call them. So I see both sides to your point. I think it reinforces your point that you're right. And for me, I would want to keep a new number and have that number owned by the company, but it is a challenge. It is a
Yeah.
challenge.
Now, I think so many of the advanced solutions from UCAS and just managing networks, et cetera, so many of those things can be done on the devices. Everything is coming back to mobility. So there was a period or so where mobility was this fringe. No one really talked about it. It wasn't that big of a deal. But not many people were really making money on it. My friend Greg Plum has a saying, from promise to profit. There's a promise of a solution, but if no one's profiting from it, what's the big deal? But I
Mhm.
do feel like, yeah, we're seeing this shift a little bit where mobility, to your point, Joe, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to
Yeah.
grow up. I read one stat that by 2027, over 53% of all telecom spend is going to be in the area of wireless mobility for
Mhm.
connectivity. So that not too shocking there. Everyone's getting away, working remote, working hybrid, working out in the field. I just had an insurance claim on a water leak. And of course, they're out here with their iPads and they're taking pictures and I'm signing stuff on their tablets. What used to be a clipboard is now a tablet of some sorts. Very cool stuff. As we wrap up here, there's probably so much more we could go into, and we can always do a part two if we want to. But last words, Joe, just start with you. Any last words you have for us? Anything we didn't cover?
I would just say last words, particularly for people in organizations, is that technologies can be learned, but it's really the people that you want to have the relationships with, whether you're working for them or you're hiring somebody or the partners that you have. And so I'm always amazed when you see a job description or people are looking for a junior level position. It says must have fintech experience. Well, why does that person need to have fintech experience? You can teach that. You don't. So you want to have someone who is eager, willing to learn, good team player, and so on. And so all of that other stuff can be taught, and you get it from experience and so on while you're there. That's why I think a lot of people, we get enamored in all of this stuff that's here in technology. And I just think that people shouldn't lose sight of people that they're just in their environment that they're working with.
Excellent. That's great words. Paul, anything to add to that? Anything you want to hit on?
I had a closing thought for myself. Years ago, I fell in love with this quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Any truly advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I've always thought that was a really fascinating thing. And if you think about it, technology can really be used for good. Whether it's AI, whether it's whatever, it can be used to do good things. It's like one of the partners we work with, Blue IP, they built AI chat tools not to replace operators at hotels, but to take some of the more mundane calls that they may get. Where's the parking garage? How do I get to this thing? How do I do that thing? That can be handled by AI to free up the humans to be able to do the really important client reach. So as that person's coming into the hotel for the first time, they can fully devote their time to that person and really make that experience human to human so much more valuable. They're not feeling, okay, well, I'm talking to you, I'm trying to get you checked in, but oh, wait, I'm sorry, I have to go take this call and help this person find the parking lot. That's the kind of thing that technology can really be used for good. And that's why we love working with certain partners that really have that same mentality as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love both of you hit on something that's so important. It's the theme of the whole conversation, the human touch. People matter. People are the ones using the
Mhm.
technology. And then, of course, the technology itself, when properly deployed, can do amazing things. And that's a good place to end it on. Thank you both for being here today. It's such a great conversation. I've enjoyed becoming friends with you over the last few months and look forward to where our partnership and friendship can go even more. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. And yes, we're going to take you up on going on to that lake next summer.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
yeah. Yeah, I'm down with it. Your lake or mine, it doesn't matter. I love my boat club. I get a boat wherever I can. There you go, folks. Another episode of The Wireless Way. And as always, if anything resonated, or you heard something, you thought of a colleague or a partner or a friend, please share this episode. Like, follow, subscribe. I love all that stuff. It helps drive the show here. And we really appreciate it. So have a great remainder of your day and week. And we'll see you next time on The Wireless Way.